Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're back here for part two of the discussion of the Ravens offense against the Bengals and that big win on Sunday. And joining me to do that is Jake Luke of the Exit 52 podcast. Jake, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Ken. Long time no speak.
Yes, it's been a matter of a couple of minutes for a bathroom break here, but thank you, because that's something that's very important to me at this age. Anyway, for the other folks out there, in terms of the first show, we talked a lot about the scheme. We talked a lot about Lamar's performance. We talked about some of the run-pass balance, the ball security being a breath of fresh air, the Ravens were able to run the ball down the opponent's throat, the state of Baltimore sports, the current injury crunch on the roster, and how that will create some difficult decisions probably yet to come. Worth a download. Please go back and do that if you haven't already. It's a good setup for the second part of the show as well. And I think we'll jump in and talk about the offensive line play if you're ready to do that. Jake?
Absolutely.
All right. So the offensive line had 0 sacks allowed in this game, just 1 quarterback hit, 4.5 pressures only that were charged to the offensive line. That's really good. So oftentimes you'll have a free runner who generates a pressure, and there were 8 times where Jackson was under pressure of some sort, and that would include the quarterback hit. So there were 2.5 pressures which were not charged to the offensive line. But the only bad thing about the offensive line performance was the 35 yards in penalties. The fact that was all spread out over 75 snaps makes the score still pretty good, but those penalties are still a concern. And in particular, when we get to talk about John Simpson, I kind of want to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen people that are smarter than me breaking down the offensive line, and some of them have concerns about Simpson just in a macro sense. It seems like he's played a little bit well, played maybe above his station to start the season. But yeah, that was a little concerning. I think Mustipher was responsible for a pretty crucial one as well there. So that was certainly tough, but it did feel like they all kind of punched above their weight out there, and they really held their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I thought it was an outstanding combined game. There's really only one player, and a little bit unexpected who it was, who didn't really have a particularly good game. But I'll start with Patrick McCary, if that's okay. And as we go along, feel free to ask any questions on this. But outstanding game replacing Stanley here. 2 pressures in the game. That's 1 full plus 2 half. I know I saw something that he didn't have any pressures against Hendrickson. That's not how I scored it. He did allow some pocket compression in there. He had people around had Hendrickson had his own feet essentially around Lamar's feet, with Hendrickson bullying him to get there. He had no other negative events, though, and 2 pressures in a whole game of 75 snaps is a terrific result for an offensive tackle. So it was very good. He did miss 4 blocks. That's not a bad number in 75 snaps. Again, 4 blocks in level 2, 1 pancake, 2 out of 3 on pulls. Really nice. He had 3 highlight combination blocks. Combination block, again, I don't talk about this every episode, but he helps to tee up a player at the line of scrimmage on a double team. Then he climbs to level 2 and makes another block there. And so those 3 highlights were nice. They all are level 2 blocks themselves. Overall grade an A in this game. Yeah,
just a guy who really seems to embrace his role, and he's been here a while now. I forget the exact year that he came in, but I remember when he did come in, I think I interviewed him that year, and he seems like a really nice kid with his head on straight. I believe he went to Cal, was from out there and everything, and he's really assimilated into this culture really well. And when he signed that extension, I mean, that's what a savvy move by this front office, because you talk about these injuries to Ronnie Stanley, and it's going to be a lingering thing for the rest of his contract and for the rest of the time that he's with the Ravens. It's just something that they're going to have to manage, and to have a swing tackle like this that can come in and perform in a pinch situation as he did, that's really impressive.
I agree, and I honestly don't believe he's the long-term solution. I think he's better as the James Worthy kind of a super sub, your 6th man, if you can have that. And as a pure backup left tackle, honestly, this performance here is just an absolute breath of fresh air against a Raven killer of many years in Hendrickson. The guy who has put all sorts of pressure on Lamar and Tyler Huntley, frankly, over the years. Just a terrific game. But yeah, they're I guess they've got McCary now for 2 more years under contract still. I believe he signed a 3-year extension after year 4. So he really is just in the first year of earning it, even though his 4th season, he was already under contract or was under RFA. And I may be wrong about that. Maybe off by a year.
I think it might be a 4-year deal, but I could be wrong.
Okay. So the 4-year deal might have included, the year he was already under his RFA deal, but that's great. At this point, I'd be a little concerned, and I don't want to be the purveyor of doom here because that's just not who I am. But you have to be realistic and say, based on the combination of the way he played in week 1 and the fact that he's hurt again, there's not a 0% chance Ronnie Stanley has played his last snap as a Raven.
Yeah, no, it's something that is always going to be at the back of my mind as a fan. And it's unfortunate because he's a guy who has really had a tough time here the last couple of years, both physically and mentally. And you just want him to get back to what he was. But with the reality of that injury, it's just never going to be the same. And I mean, it's unfortunate for the Ravens that they signed him to that contract when they did, because what happens a week later, that does. So it's just it's a little reflective of their injury luck overall, but I also don't want to be too woe is me as a fan type thing. Like, this is this guy's career. And then, really, really took a tough turn and got derailed there. So it's tough to see. They're going to have to continue to manage it. Like I said, like they signed him to that deal, and they're just going to have to live with it until it's through.
Right. They are in a position, if they want to try and get out of it after this year. There's about an $8 million cap savings next year. They could even accelerate some 2025 money and get about, I think, 16 or 17 million in cap savings by doing it post June 1. So if they felt like they could either get through with McCary, go to the free agent market and sign somebody, or potentially even accumulate a draft pick or two, maybe trade a player for a draft pick, they might be able to get up into the range where they could draft a high value tackle, maybe a guy who's not quite ready, but has most of the high end traits that people like. And McCary takes the job for a year or some portion of a year to get this new guy ready.
Yeah, I could certainly see them exploring all the options, because it's tough, especially with a crucial game like this. Like, if they would have had their druthers, they probably would have just sat him against the Texans and then had him play in this game. But the timing just didn't work out, and it's just been kind of reflective of the messy process that this has been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I want to be clear here. I do not want to be writing Ronnie Stanley's epitaph here as a football player. I want him to come back from this injury, and I want him to enjoy playing football. I want him to be healthy and happy playing football. And obviously that would be the best situation for the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think it's impossible that he could come back from this, play well for the next couple of years, such that the Ravens, can't even think about releasing him from the final years of his contract, and all of a sudden be a Ring of Honor candidate again. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But I do think that anytime a player at this age with his kind of injury history has another injury of this type, you've got to be worried.
Yeah, no, you certainly have to be. And I don't want to be writing those obituaries for his career anytime soon either. So hopefully they figure it out and he comes through this thing okay.
All right, let's talk about John Simpson. You had some comments earlier about John and some things about John Simpson. Obviously came to Baltimore with a huge concern about penalties, and I've rattled these stats off so much I don't need them in front of me to see. But John Simpson with the Raiders had 17 penalties in 1,545 career offensive snaps, more than 1% of snaps he was penalized. And it wasn't just that; it was the magnitude of the penalties. Only 2 of those were false starts, 13 offensive holds, and 2 personal fouls. Well, he had looked good in the preseason in game 1. Obviously, the sample size was not what we'd want exactly yet. And unfortunately, he had an offensive hold on a very tough customer, DJ Reader, in this game. That was one of his problems. And also had a false start in the game, which, false starts, there's a certain cost of doing business if they don't become a real problem. But you'd like your interior linemen certainly to have fewer false starts. Sometimes your tackles get them because they're cheating to try and set up properly against a good pass rusher. That's not the case with Simpson. So he'll being as close to the ball as he is, that there would be less of a risk of him having this.
Yeah, and to be fair, I can call those in the budget for road divisional game, especially that was as probably as loud as I've seen that Cincinnati Stadium in a long time. This is a fan base that has been rebuilt over the last couple of years. They were fired up. So you can call that in the budget. You can say that's okay. But yeah, you do not want that to be a lingering concern for an offense that is trying to put this procedural penalty kind of nonsense behind them after what has been a rough couple of years in that regard for them.
Yeah, so the holding penalty is more of the return of past problems for John Simpson that I thought, the Dallas Andrus has done a wonderful job of coaching out bad habits from I'm going to use the term marginal defensive offensive lineman, but maybe a better use is undervalued offensive lineman, because or poorly coached offensive lineman maybe is another even better way to put it. But Simpson and Mustafa both were guys who came from their old teams with problems, with a fair amount of baggage. They're both fourth-year players. And it looks to me like both had taken a big step forward in terms of their preseason play. And I'm happy so far with what each of them has done during the regular season. I'm just a little more concerned about the penalties with Simpson. I'll go through a little bit of the rest of his game here, because he only had one negative play in the game, and that was a 1/3 pressure on a 2-gap stunt by Miles Murphy. So Miles Murphy, of course, the defensive end drafted out of Clemson this last year. He was playing in Hendrickson's spot. He jumped over 2 gaps. Actually, it was really more like 3 gaps to rush through the right B gap. And what that meant was the interior offensive linemen had to each pass off their guys. It rarely happens. You have a double pass off that occurs on the same play. Normally, it's a single pass off on a 1-gap stunt or twist, where you have to take care of business and do that properly. This was two pass offs, and they didn't get it negotiated properly. So just accounted that pressure as being a 1/3 to each player. The offensive hold on Reeder, you just let Reeder get outside of his frame, and as almost always is true, the hold didn't have anything to do with the play. It probably 20% of total holding penalties, it actually has something to do with the play when it's on a run. This was in the 80%, not a good one. So that was unfortunate. He did have 4 missed blocks in the game. One thing we're seeing a fair amount this year is Simpson being on the ground. And I was more concerned about it in week 1, where he was victim of a number of push-pull move. I don't know if you work with anybody else who's doing a little bit of film analysis, just saw that happening to him.
Yeah, no, I certainly did. And I think that's where, when I talk to some of these people, it sounds like there is maybe some concern that, not that he's going to be a problem on a play-by-play basis, but that when he gets put into these matchups with a guy like a Reeder or some of these other D tackles that he's going to be going up against. I know Cam Hayward's hurt right now, but some of these guys in the AFC North that are going to present a problem for him, that in a high leverage situation, the cream of the crop rises. And Simpson, for as much of a grinder as he is and a good story, he's maybe not necessarily the cream of the crop compared to some of these players. And that's where it can maybe bite them a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I actually think Simpson's a better player than people will give him credit for, because I think most of his problem with the penalties, Simpson is otherwise built exactly like you'd like an offensive tackle built. Might not have the feet to play left tackle, but it wouldn't have shocked me, and it still wouldn't shock me if something happened to McCary, if Simpson is their choice to move out to left tackle, just because he's got 34-inch arms. He's been a good pass blocker, generally speaking, needs to avoid holding calls, but hopefully that's something that can be coached out of him. And it would not surprise me if he's the Ravens' choice to go there. They might go with Falele, and that might be the right choice, because it doesn't discontinuitize the rest of the line, by making only a 1-for-1 switch. But Falele has his own problems being out there left tackle. We saw them on full display last year. So I kind of like, who Simpson could be for this team as a versatile player. We'll see how that works out.
I think the floor is raised a little bit. You mentioned D'Alessandris and just this coaching staff offensively right now. I just think they're in a really good spot, and it raises the floor of the players like this who you're having come in, and you're going to have to count on them to a certain extent. And you mentioned the penalties. I mean, he's playing for a rudderless, just adrift at sea Josh McDaniels Raiders team last year. I mean, there's just nothing to get excited about there. And I couldn't blame a guy for maybe checking out a little bit mentally. And it sounded like he did have go to some dark places mentally when he whatever the story was, where he left the team, and he comes to the Ravens and he earns a starting job, and it's a great story. So
this is one of the things I think, and maybe I'll ask it as a question, but do you think that the process of allowing Saleh to start at left guard during OTAs was actually manufactured to light a campfire under John Simpson's butt? Because it was taking more than a few matches, clearly.
It's funny you mentioned that, because did they do that to light a fire under Ben Cleveland's butt? And then what happened? Yeah, it's funny how these battles work out sometimes. And I think you're maybe onto something there, because this Saleh guy, I mean, we hear a lot about him to open the open camp as it breaks, and then just little by little, he kind of starts to recede into the background. And you're right, Simpson sort of rose to the occasion. Ben Cleveland kind of nowhere to be found as of right now. So I think the cream kind of rose in that situation, to reuse that phrase a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely was a case where I really believe Harbaugh would be the master behind manufacturing that sort of a false competition to basically say, look, we think Simpson's probably the guy. And honestly, Saleh, I don't know what they might have seen earlier, but by the time contact was starting, including the practices against the Redskins and certainly all the preseason, Saleh's not ready for an NFL field right now. He's a developmental offensive lineman who could at some point be pretty good. But he's at least a year away, NFL weight room, grow into his body, yada, yada, yada. He's just not ready to play on the offensive line in a game, and he's active now. So, he's still not exactly the ideal situation, but he's, if he was called on, it would not be a good thing. I don't know if you saw this, but Ben Cleveland apparently was actually taking snaps at center in the pregame.
I did see this, and it's a good thing that, maybe for him that they're having some issues there health-wise with Linderbaum right now, because it just feels like a couple years in a row, it has not materialized for him at all, and it feels like attitude-wise, he is maybe persona non grata with that coaching staff right now, and I feel like this might be the last year of the Ben Cleveland experiment in Baltimore.
I don't disagree at all, and as long as the Ravens had the lead, I would kind of love to see him give me the game at center. There is no other center probably in league history who's ever played at that size. And center's responsibilities typically are either to take the back end of a double team or to chip effectively, to combination block, to start a double team, then climb to level 2. Ben Cleveland, is the back end of a if somebody can help him get a player teed up a little bit, he'll take him in the next week. And his chip blocks, the combinations he's going to make are going to pancake a lot of. I would love to see him at center if I had any confidence that he could actually deliver the ball to Lamar without Lamar being under center for every single play.
Yeah, or make the calls, make the checks, be the leader, do all.
That's got to be Zeitler doing that.
Yeah. not to rag on that too much, but that doesn't seem like it would go too well.
Yeah. It's not an ideal situation. It would be fun to watch. Let me finish off with Simpson here. We'll move on. He was 2 out of 2 on his polls. He had a difficult week 1 in terms of polling, so it was nice to see. 5 level 2 blocks, 1 pancake, 3 highlights. By the way, we're going to get to Zeitler in a little bit. Zeitler was 12 out of 13 on polls, and Simpson was 2 out of 2 on polls. What that tells you in part is that the Ravens changed the handedness of their run game, probably to deal with the fact that Simpson hadn't been all that effective with polls in the first week. So that's it's an interesting change and a very much an adaptation from Monken to the situation. So I'd be interested in who maybe suggested that as a possibility, or if it's all Monken, or if D'Alessandro says, it's not seeming to work out. Let's try and change this and make Zeitler the primary. I thought that was an interesting change. And a lot of you asked me like before in part 1, was it part of the offensive line changes that meaning the 2 guys who were injured, that they were lost my train of thought here. That they were running on balance as they did. But I think that could also have something to do with the fact that Simpson, wasn't pulling as effectively. So they wanted to get Zeitler on the move. Well, you can unbalance the line and you can have him move under those circumstances too. So Simpson a B- for the game the whole point. He's sneaked in exactly on the minimum point requirement for that. And honestly, I think he's had a very solid start to the year, a C and a B- in the 2 games. I don't grade on a curve at all. I allow these things to fluctuate a lot week by week. And I'm very happy with Simpson's start to the season.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you can get a B- out of John Simpson for what you signed him for, and you probably didn't expect much when you signed him, I think that's good for everyone.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about Sam Mustipher. Solid first start for the Ravens, a 3rd share of 1 pressure event, same as the other guys that we mentioned earlier. Offensive hold on Reader. It actually happened to play immediately after Simpson had an offensive hold on Reader. So that was bad. His was in level 2, where he's blocking ahead of Lamar's run play. And unfortunately, it wiped out a run. I'd say that one was also in the 80% that didn't need to happen. And he let him get a little outside the frame. And unfortunately, the flag was thrown again. He missed 5 blocks, but only one of those was a loss at the line of scrimmage. So Mustipher moved to level 2 4 times and couldn't find a block. Mustipher is not the most mobile lineman. He's a very big physical presence. He's a 330-pound guy at center, which is very large for a center in the NFL these days. And mobility is just not his real strength. He did not pull in the game at all. He did have 2 blocks in level 2. Of course, if he had 2 blocks in level 2, I already told you he moved to level 2 and couldn't find a block 4 times. So he made 2 out of 6 blocks in level 2. Not exactly ideal. Did not have a pancake. One nice highlight combination block that I noted it, and that'll be out in the article tomorrow. One of the things I've seen from him so far is the snaps have been pretty good. They look to be on target, not really off too much left or right. Velocity might be a little off from what you get with Linderbaum, but also not missing too much lower high either. So we're not seeing Lamar reach up for a ball, reach down for a ball, left or right very much. It seems to be he's surprisingly very solid in terms of the snaps.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up too, because I feel like Linderbaum actually in week 1 had some timing issues where Lamar didn't know the ball was coming. I think on that fumble that he had, he caught it and it seemed like it was in sync, but then he kind of lost the ball on the fumble that they did lose in that game, I think. So yeah, it was good to see that from Mustipher, and it's something that you certainly cannot take for granted with this offense, as we've seen over the last couple of years. Ravens fans are very sensitive to having a center who can actually snap the ball. So yeah, for your whatever he is, your second stringer at this point, good to see.
I wondered about this a little bit this week, and I haven't expressed this on any of the pods so far, but would it be normal to bring in your long snapper? And the long snappers are known for, snapping a ball into a moving car, into a bucket, and, their snaps are effectively, 3 times the normal length of a shotgun snap, probably, maybe longer than that even in some cases. And they have to be right on the money or it's a big problem. And I wonder if your long snapper couldn't come in and give tips to your center. Now they'd resent it. There's no doubt about that. But the other point of the thing, the center is going to say, well, you never have to face anybody who's bearing down on you right as you snap the ball. So you can talk all you want about rotation of the football and angle of the ball you want to hold it at and blah, 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 blah. But you don't have the same problems I have. But I do really think there's some exchange of ideas there that would be very valuable between a long snapper and a guy, especially a guy who's new to the center position.
Yeah, you're getting into the marketplace of ideas on the finer points of snapping. I like that a lot. I think it is something that probably should take place. I mean, especially with the Ravens, they tend to find these guys kind of out of nowhere. You had Nick Moore, you had Morgan Cox for a long time. Maybe Tyler Ott could talk to Mustipher a little bit about this, or maybe even Linderbaum if he's the one having the issues here. But that it feels like we're approaching
or Cleveland.
Exactly. Yeah, well, if you try that experiment out, it feels like we're approaching a Voss kind of galaxy brain thing where you just have the center and the long snapper be the same person so you can save a roster spot. It feels like that's the cutting edge kind of economics we've come to expect from a guy like that.
That would be an interesting choice because it's a different body type.
Oh yeah.
So it's normally a tight end type body type because they don't have to get touched. So it's a nice benefit to being a long snapper. All right. C+ for Mustipher for the game. Again, I'm very happy. C and a C+, his first 2 games, looking good, honestly. I'm sorry. He didn't have a C in the first game. He came in for 5 snaps, made all 5 of his blocks. So he's looked good so far in 2 games. And aside from that very costly penalty that helped stall a drive, I think his game was a good one against the Bengals.
Yeah, definitely. It's another kind of thing with Simpson, and even more to this extent because Mustipher really is kind of the spot starter here, and just another guy on this offensive line that they found who can at least give them a good 60 minutes, if not more than that. So,
move on. Talk about Kevin Zeitler a little bit. He allowed a QH, and this was one I think that was mischarged by some people. I noticed PFF had it mischarged that he actually blocked Reader in such a way that he tripped up Moses. So he clipped Moses's back foot as he was pushing Reader by. First of all, anytime you have to push a player across the pocket such that your offensive lineman's feet are in danger, it's a bad thing. And whatever happens wrong, that's getting charged to you in my book. So if there's entanglement there, and in this case there was, Moses kind of halfway slipped. Hubbard slipped off him, and he was going to be disadvantaged on the block anyway. And Hubbard went in and delivered the quarterback hit to Lamar. So that was unfortunate, but not on Moses, really all on Zeitler in that particular case. He did give up 2 other full pressures in the game. plus partials on 2 others. He had a half and the third that we've talked about earlier. He held BJ Hill on a spin move. A lot of his action was against Hill and Tapau. So it wasn't the top lineman by any stretch. He didn't get Hendrickson. He didn't get a lot of Reeder in this game. So it wasn't the best guys he was up again. Had 4 missed blocks. Only one of those was a loss at the line of scrimmage, which is nice. Other times he was going to L2 and not finding a block, or he missed one pull as well. The big thing, the one positive I really take from this game for Zeitler is that he was 12 of 13 on pulls. And his mobility and the ability to pull, the fact that they could readapt their offensive line to go unbalanced and still pull with him, was one of the things that allowed them to run out that football game at the end with 5 unbalanced line plays on the last 6. So some good things that good thing to pull out of this game, but otherwise Zeitler's pass blocking is a major concern earlier in the season.
Yeah, he looked visibly frustrated too, not even just on the penalties, but just in certain aspects of the game. It looked like a guy who we've not really seen lose his cool in many different respects when he maybe could have over the years, kind of unraveling at times throughout the game. And it was weird. And it kind of makes me think back a little bit to, wasn't there a report came out? I think Schefter might have even put it out that he wanted a new contract earlier this summer. Yeah. And he never got that. And here we are. And I wonder if at all that's still kind of lingering and affecting his play here. But yeah, not an ideal start for the guy who theoretically probably should have been your best player out there on that offensive line.
Yeah, I agree with that. First of all, I think he is, and he's certainly the most savvy, and he's the guy you trust with the line calls with the current group that's out there at the bare minimum. I don't know what they would do if they lost Zeitler and Cleveland had to go in there, and it's then between Cleveland, Mustipher, and Simpson about who can make line calls. I mean, Mustipher's the guy, but I would be a little bit concerned about the quality of what's going on and his ability to focus on that and getting the snap right and everything. I think would be very difficult. Getting back to Zeitler's contract the Ravens obviously have a lot of free agents coming through the pipe this year. So they have a ton of free agent talent leaving. What's your level of concern with that? Because obviously a lot of what they've done is play for this year. Are you concerned at all about their ability to reshape a roster for 2024?
A little bit. And it feels like they find guys kind of at the edges of where they're not all the way kind of the washed up older guy, but they can still offer you a little bit, but you can also get them at a decent enough rate like they did with a Matt Burke back in the day. And then they did with him. But it feels like they don't always just do it right away. They don't turn the engine over right away. So when Matt Burke leaves, you turn to Gino Gradkowski, and that's a disaster. And I totally get the thought process of let's develop our young guys. Let's let them make some mistakes. But sometimes the drop-off is just way too steep. And I feel like if Zeitler is not going to be around for much longer, it leaves me with some concern that they're not going to find that just right player, right price guy that can slot right in right away, because it's not going to happen every year realistically. So, yeah, it's certainly a concern for me.
And on the offensive line in particular, the Voorhees selection, I think, was one, a guy who might be a 2nd or 3rd round talent otherwise, is a guy they really hope is going to be able to play in 24. And it would not surprise me if they've kind of already penciled him in for that right guard slot, that they know they can't really compete to sign Zeitler. And there's another factor in play here, too. At Zeitler's age, it's actually kind of dangerous to re-sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal. He probably wants a 3-year deal anyway. To which the Ravens probably ought to say, good luck. We hope you get as much money as possible, and he has as big a year as he can. But you don't want to be caught on the back end of a player's career where they constantly want to renegotiate a 2-year contract every last year of their deal, which means you're negotiating a 2-year contract every year they play. And they went through that with Ed Reed. They went through that with Derek Mason. And they went through it for one time with Marshall Yanda, which I don't have a problem doing it one time for a Hall of Famer. But you don't want to really go through it on the tail end of a not at the very top end player.
Yeah, I don't think they will. And I think if they were going to go to the table with him, they probably would have already done that. I think the 3-year deal that you're talking about probably would have already been signed, sealed, delivered. So maybe that could be the area that we're at and where we're approaching. And if a divorce is coming, I think that's certainly unfortunate. But to your point, going back to the table in a situation like that should be reserved for a Hall of Famer who's still playing well, because we saw them with a Hall of Famer with Reed, and they said, hey, thanks for everything, but we'll see ya. And that was the right decision at the time. So, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I do hope at the very least that they get the consummate level that they've gotten from him the last couple of years, because it's going to be pretty crucial.
Yeah. And I want to be fair to him. I've enjoyed scoring every snap of his Ravens career, and he's been a fantastic signing. The price tag was perfect. It was, he outplayed his contract, which is very rare for free agents you sign at that age. Usually football players in their 30s give you negative surprises. They almost never give you a positive surprise.
Yeah, tread on his tires too. I mean, he played for the Browns, the Bengals, the Giants. He's had a long career on the offensive line. That's not something where veterans kind of hold up to the extent that he has. He's probably a little bit more of a rarity in that case. So it's amazing that they got the play out of him that they did. To your point,
yeah, for my money, he's probably the best offensive lineman in the NFL now with his sort of tenure to never make a Pro Bowl. It's still amazing to me that he never squeaked in somehow in a AFC that frankly had opportunities.
Yeah, and with guys that kind of just stopped going. I mean, when it's getting to the point where I think Flacco got like the third alternate or whatever that one year. I think Andy Dalton, the seventh alternate. Tyler Huntley's making it last year. It feels like at a certain point, like you would get at least one. So that's too bad for him.
Yeah. I guess guards are less likely to turn down the invite, a free trip to Hawaii or wherever they play that game now. I know it's just a skills challenge, but
it's I think they go to Vegas. It's almost I think I tweeted last year. It's kind of turning into like a corporate retreat almost. It's very beautiful that they found a way to turn it into something like that.
Oh, very good. All right, D- for Zeitler after adjustment for him, so he barely squeaked in over the pass line. Moses, I'll get to very quickly, did very well versus Sam Hubbard. And Hubbard, of course, a Ravens killer like Hendrickson over the years, and one of the guys who's been very effective at providing some pressure, even with a four-man rush for the Bengals. But Moses really took care of business against him. He didn't have a single negative event. He had 4 missed blocks, as I scored it, 2 losses at the line of scrimmage among those 4 missed. In both cases, Lamar either had the ball out quickly or ran for positive yardage. So in either cases, did he get a negative score on it. Made 3 level 2 blocks, 2 pancakes, 6 out of 6 on pulls. One of the kind of tenets of my system is that when a guy is on the back end of a counter, where he's the second puller, as Moses often is when the pull goes left and either Zeitler or the center would be in front of him, then he doesn't get, he's not required to get a pull. But the thing about Moses's game last year, he almost always found somebody. Just remarkably mobile for a man his size in terms of being able to find blocks and process the information. It's very chaotic information you're getting, and linemen know what they're looking for to a good degree, but they can get confused by color just like anybody can in terms of trying to pick up who should I block here between this guy who's coming around the edge and might not impact the play and this guy in level 2 who, if I maintain my momentum, I'll have a bigger impact on. So Moses just been terrific at that. So they had 3 freebies in this game, but even if he hadn't gotten those, he'd have still been an A with or without adjustment in this game. It was that good.
Yeah, and my kind of neophyte eye, even I managed to catch that early block, that tone setting block that I mentioned, where I think he pulled and just absolutely eliminated a guy. And it's very important in a game like that where you got to establish a rhythm. You got to establish like, hey, we're injured along this offensive line, but we're not going to allow it to overly affect our performance. We're going to come out here and punch you in the mouth a little bit. And him doing that, I think, really set a good tone for the offensive line to start the game.
Yeah. I like who he is as a lineman. I would be surprised if other linemen don't look up to him in the room. I mean, you got good players, in general. They might look up to Zeitler more. I really don't know, but Moses, in terms of the effort he puts out on the field, is very high. And I think the Ravens got more than they expected out of him when they signed him, or maybe they saw the talent that other teams didn't. But he was a hell of a free agent pickup. I mean, just a hell of a signing.
Yeah, vocal leader too. He's breaking them down in the locker room. He's very, very just very eloquent on the mic, I think, and always has a lot of good things to say. So yeah, just another guy kind of similar to Zeitler. Funny enough that they play right next to each other, who just you're getting a lot more value out of.
As a bettor, you demand perfection, and MyBookie delivers. NFL, college football, and a brand new cash out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. If the first 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and use those funds for another bet, or let it all ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join the MyBookie family for an entire season filled with odds boosts, free bets, and super contests. This season, MyBookie has a no strings attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on a deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly to your MyBookie account. Bet your deposit amount once, and you're ready to cash out at any time. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash deposit bonus. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code Ravens50 like I did to get 50% off. That's Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals.
And then that contract might have represented. So believe for him.
All right. Well, let's jump in and talk about some skill position players. And we've talked about some of these. Of course, we don't have to talk about everyone, but who would you like to talk about first?
I wanted to go to Nelson Aguilar.
Okay.
It kind of speaks to what I was talking about, where they had a clear approach to this offseason that, look, it's been long enough. We're going to go ahead and improve this passing game. And it's funny because he's that first signing that they make with their free agency class, right? Free agency class, if you want to call it that. I mean, they kind of signed him as an afterthought a little bit to some people. I remember the Spot Track guy tweeted something about how they hadn't signed Jackson to the contract and they had barely improved anything. And it's like, oh, just stay the course. Ravens being the Ravens again. And I got a little, I'm a fan. I got emotional and I was annoyed with that. And of course, that doesn't wind up being it at all. They sign Beckham, they draft Flowers, but this is a type of mid-tier guy that they would sign, and then that would be it, and he would be their big ticket wide receiver in the past. But the fact that they didn't do that, and then they go out and they get a Beckham, they get a Flowers, but then you get a game like this where, yeah, Beckham gets hurt. It's so much less pressure on the shoulders of a guy like Aguilar, and I think it showed really well. He was playing fast, he was playing loose, getting open over the middle, and then the slot fade touchdown, a beautiful throw by Lamar, but also a great catch by him. Mm-hmm. Love the celebration too, by the way. It was just a really, really fun celebration with the dance there. But 5 catches, 63 yards, 12.6 average, and no drop issues, nothing like that. That's kind of he's been known for a little bit and kind of made, poked fun at over the years. Just a really, really solid performance. And like I had been saying all offseason, you could do a lot worse than this guy as your 4. You could do a lot worse than Devin Duvernay as your 5. And early on in the season, having an injury issue with Odell Beckham and watching a guy like that step up, super encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I wouldn't have been able to give you a good over-under on what he might accomplish this year. And people always want to talk about yards and this, but a lot of it was going to be injury dependent in terms of this. But after putting up a game like this, and frankly, after having a camp where he was very effective and he had to earn some trust from Lamar during that camp that may have even impacted the number of chances he got in this game, the number of targets he got. I think that now there is a very wide range of potential outcomes right now for Nelson Aguilar in terms of what he could do for this team. It wouldn't shock me if they got 550 yards out of Nelson Aguilar at this point. It also wouldn't shock me if he goes back in the can, Beckham is ready to go again, the Ravens stay largely healthy, Bateman's snaps increase, and he gets 220 yards. But
Yeah.
there's a wide range of outcomes.
Yeah, and I think you're pretty much hoping for the latter, right? You signed Beckham for a lot of money. You want to be able to get some production out of that guy for sure, and that would come at the expense of Aguilar's touches. But I'd almost prefer that for a lot of different reasons on a lot of different levels, because it's going to get colder, it's going to get more difficult, and Beckham's going to have some tread on his tires certainly, and he's an older guy who's been injured a little bit, and so by the time you get to the playoffs and things get more crucial, and as I think Parcells used to say, the season really starts around Thanksgiving. Having guys like this in the can, to your point, that you can turn to when things get tough is huge, and I think we saw a glimpse of it today, and hopefully he does go on the shelf, and then when they do need him in those big moments, he shows up like he did.
Yeah, and not to beat on a really nice guy by all accounts, James Prochet would have been the similar guy they're turning to for injury snaps last year, and maybe to a lesser degree Tylan Wallace, who is I think basically the Ravens view him as a special teams player at this point. I don't see him getting a lot of play at wide receiver this year. Again, it could happen because of injuries. We hope it doesn't, but he's a much higher quality guy. I had some problems with Aguilar as a player, the drops in particular. And my main problem was I didn't want to spend void year money on him again. I didn't want to spend the money out of 2024. And I really, really did not want to spend the 6th round draft pick they lost out of the compensatory formula for signing him. So I thought there's probably another better option. Given how he's played, I'm at least to neutral on that call right now. I'm 5 out of 6, big win against Cincinnati. That's almost enough to justify his entire contract right there in terms of play value you get out of him.
Yeah, and I think at a certain point, if you're the Ravens, you have to accept that you're not Pittsburgh. You're not finding these guys in the 4th to 6th round. You're not even finding these guys in the 2nd round. Frankly, you're not even really finding them in the 1st round for the most part. Hollywood Brown had some good moments, certainly. Torrey Smith in the 2nd round 10 years ago, that's great. Mm-hmm. You can't draft these guys. So you got to just, eventually you have to bite the bullet and spend a little bit of money. And did they overspend this offseason? Maybe, but you got to correct this problem position eventually. And it looks like they're off to a good start for 2023.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Zay Flowers is correcting the position. The signings of Beckham and Aguilar are band-aiding the position, which is a lot of my issue here is that, there's other guys they could have gone out. You could find somebody else's R or 1 discard and develop him. Now, that's not the Ravens, way, but they have better receiving coaches in Lewis and Williams that they really trust now, I think. And at some point, you got to kind of give them the keys to an older, potentially restorable car and let them, make something out of him. And hopefully a guy who's still got a year or 2 under contract, in particular, a little bit of sand in the hourglass that you can develop.
Yeah, certainly. It was a weird offseason on a lot of different fronts. And they signed Aguilar well before the Jackson contract was done. It was before Beckham was in the picture, like I mentioned. So it was just kind of one of those signings that I think maybe flew under the radar a little bit. And it was good to, as you said, they essentially got their return on it already. And hopefully it's going to continue to be that way.
All right, great stuff. I'm going to jump in and talk about Rashad Bateman. And Bateman's now had the ball thrown to him 6 times this year, caught all 6 of them for, I think, 53 yards. So nothing wrong with that at all. Almost 9 yards per target. Bateman last year was over 10 yards per target. He's had some good bailout ability, a really nice bailout catch in the first game to save Lamar from a potential ball that could have been thrown into trouble that he threw back across his body, and he made a nice diving attempt on the ball. Really hasn't gotten much in the way of yak opportunities, whereas he's can really provide value there that we've seen. Has also not gotten a deep opportunity yet, but his snaps increased from 25 to 44 between game 1 and game 2. I'm excited about that, and I still believe, even though Flowers is now the number 1 receiver, obviously, that Bateman really should be the X that is the other primary cog, as opposed to, say, OBJ getting a huge target share. I think what OBJ can give you a lot of nice possession receiving, he can give you some savvy defensive plays, but I want Bateman to be the go-to guy, frankly. And the fact that they have Bateman now for this year and either 1 or 2 more makes it all that much more important that you develop him with his targets this year, as opposed to just letting him ride along in OBJ's shadow.
Yeah, and when you talk about the X in the technical sense, like I feel like I do like him more in that role of I'm out on an island and then the Y and the Z and Beckham and Flowers can move around a little bit and go in motion and stuff like that. I just feel like he profiles for that better. I think back to that Browns game in Cleveland with Huntley where he was just chucking it up to him and he's just snatching the ball out of the air and he's beating guys and winning in a phone booth. I feel like he does profile for that pretty well. So I think you make a good point there and off to a good start, I think, so far. And it just feels like there's been very few, if any, negative moments with him on the field throughout his career. It's just been injuries and it's just been the mentality stuff. And he had a rough year from all the stuff that he went through in his personal life that you can go and look into if you're not aware. It's been a rough go for him. So it's nice to see him off to a solid start here.
Yeah, and one of the problems for him that it came up in Minnesota and it came up even in his time with the Ravens on the very first ball thrown to him was the drop that went for the interception. And he had other drops that have been a part of his experience in the NFL as well. But catching 6 out of 6 balls so far early this season is a great sign for him. I mean, there's not signature significance to that sample size, but there's enough there to make me want to see more out of Bateman. The one thing I'll say about him being the X receiver, when he's out there on an island, that's his opportunity to put his route running savvy on display. So when he gets to the top of the stem, he's the best the Ravens have got at creating separation with his route running because he can make that cornerback guess wrong. He's the best at it that the Ravens have got. Odell is good at making the guy guess wrong, but he doesn't have the speed to separate that Bateman does. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to this year is to see how much can Beckham impart additional wisdom to Bateman in terms of how to run routes that would be even above and beyond. But Bateman's already he's the guy who has the best route running skills, and that's no knock on Flowers. He's an incredibly sudden athlete. He gets a ton of separation from just his suddenness, but he also hasn't been put in the position to make that cornerback make the wrong judgment too often.
Yeah, I think with Flowers' speed, he almost doesn't even need to rely on it in the same way that a guy like Bateman, who's a bit more of a technician and more physical, would have to. And I think Beckham really is kind of the perfect mentor for him. I think they profile similar a little bit athletically. I think Beckham maybe had more explosiveness in his kind of heyday there. But yeah, I think Beckham has learned to become a technician in his own right as he's gotten into the veteran stage of his career here. So it's a good relationship. It seems like they have a good relationship, which is nice because, to my point earlier, Bateman didn't seem too happy with Eric DeCosta's approach at the wide receiver position earlier. And who knew what he was going to think about a guy coming in and taking his target share and what's a crucial pre-fifth year option year for him here. Yep. So yeah, it's good to see that they're getting along really well. And Beckham is actually, he's been through a lot. He's one of the most famous athletes in the world right now, probably, which is kind of crazy to think that he's on the Ravens, but there you have it. And he's had to weather a lot of stuff with the media, weather a lot in his personal life. And it seems like they've developed not only a great professional relationship, but a good personal one too.
Okay. Here, I've got a question for you because I have a kind of a theory that Beckham as an anti-hero for the other team is a good thing. Okay. That they had Terrell Suggs for years and he was an anti-hero. The other team hated him. The hate gets all focused there. Other teammates, can build off what the energy Terrell Suggs brings. The rivalry with Pittsburgh, Suggs was completely in place with that. There's video out there, of him doing that. And Beckham, I think, brings a little bit of that big game juice to the Ravens. And not necessarily, doesn't even have to necessarily be the vocal guy. You can rely on other people like that. But if other people want to look at what Odell Beckham is doing and how he responds to that kind of pressure, it's good. Here's my question for you. Is there any positive value you can derive from the fact that it's now being reported that Odell Beckham is dating Kim Kardashian?
Well, let me tell you a little something. There might be a bit of an exclusive report. It's not necessarily explicitly stated, but coming on our podcast tomorrow with Jack Settleman, who has a little bit of an indirect connection there with Odell Beckham, thanks to Marlon Humphrey, that may actually be, there might be some truth to those rumors. So yeah, it's wild, man. Like, I don't know. I never would have thought that we as Ravens fans, and I made this exact argument. I think it might have been last year when he was flirting with the idea of signing with the team. The Ravens really wanted him at the time. Even Harbaugh was like really stumping for him. And ultimately he chose not to sign anywhere. But I remember saying at the time, it's nothing against him and it's nothing against Baltimore, but Odell Beckham is not going to want to come to Baltimore. Like, he's going to want to go to Dallas. He's going to want to go back to New York. Maybe he's going to want to go somewhere where he can get seen walking into steakhouses and going to the club and dating these famous people and things like that. And he's maybe just not going to get as much of that here. And it turns out maybe he's having his cake and eating it too, because now he's here, but the headlines are still kind of rolling. And to the original question, no, it is not a positive in my opinion. I'm very, very concerned, and I hope this thing is snuffed out before it develops into anything too serious, because we've already had, I think it was the Drake curse came in maybe 4 years ago with Lamar Jackson. Now we've got this going on.
Kyle Bowler and Tara Reid relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all sorts of alarm bells going off right now. A lot of PTSD kicking in here.
So just think about that. There's a significant age difference between these two. So when the O.J. Simpson was riding in the white Bronco, I think Odell had not even been born yet. But if he had been born, he was like 1 or something, because Odell was born.
He had to have been, because he's a couple years older than me. I was born in 95 and that was 94. So,
okay. 11/5/92, he was born. So when that happened, he was a 2-year-old and Kim Kardashian was already a mean girl. And, you see this in terms of being probably, I mean, if you're Kim Kardashian, you're probably a mean girl by the time you're in 6th grade. But
the what was it? The FX series,
yes,
the O.J. Simpson, where it's David Schwimmer talking to Cuba Gooding Jr. Please don't, commit suicide in little Kimmy's room. Like it was a little bit of a canned kind of joke in there. But yeah, it was Kim Kardashian was probably like 11 to 12 years old at the time. So yeah, you're not wrong.
And he had to continually lecture his kids. Schwimmer was playing the Kardashian, the lawyer who was representing Simpson. He had to continue to lecture his kids about, that's not the way we are in this family. We don't seek attention for no reason. It's just very funny.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh wow. It was very well done. It was one of the very funny little sub segments you got to get a look at. I love that series. We really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was good.
All right, your turn.
You think? Wish I had kind of thought of that. I got a little too caught up there in our Robert Kardashian thing. Patrick Queen, how about him?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, Patrick Queen, defender. So we're gonna lift him for the last show. I'm sorry, take an offensive player if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll go to let's go to Mark Andrews then.
Okay,
another guy who just kind of coming off of injury there. It felt like maybe it was going to be, is he a decoy kind of going into this? Or are they just kind of having him active for that reason? Maybe do a little blocking and get out of town. But no, more active than I was expecting, eating up space in the middle of the field. Lamar had a couple situations where he maybe threw a couple hospital balls, but I thought he controlled it really well. He kept him safe. It looked like he got out of there with a clean bill of health, or at least as clean as it was going to be. And then they ran that sort of pick play a little bit to perfection. And I was impressed by the blocking on that play too, because it's pretty easy to get yourself caught up in offensive pass interference on those kind of pick plays that they run. But scored a touchdown on that, and he kind of just looked like, if not every bit of Mark Andrews, then maybe like an 85%. And that was a really welcome addition to a passing game that was a little lacking in week 1.
I agree completely. Mark catching 5 of 8 balls with no bad things happening is fine. Good solid game in terms of the results. It certainly was a chain mover in the game. I think it might have been the first throw to him, the first down that he caught. He had found a space in the zone, and it seemed like he waited for about a second and a half and was impatient for the football in terms of getting it from the backside. They showed this. Mark Andrews comes and sits down in the zone. He's waiting, and finally the ball comes out. And do you take anything negative from what's happened at camp? Andrews has had some emotional outbursts. Some of them may have been related to injury. Others may have been related to not being directly involved in the offense in the same way that he's used to with Lamar.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, especially the latter one there. I think anyone would be a little frustrated by injuries, certainly. And a guy like that who has largely avoided the big ones throughout his career, it had to have been tough. But yeah, I mean, if that's his concern, then if the latter is concern, that is, then I feel like this past game had to have been pretty encouraging for him. It was maybe a little bit on the lower side as far as receiving yards. He's usually that go-to guy approaching 100 yards pretty much week in and week out. But, he gets in there, and to your point, he catches 5 balls. And I thought he really was kind of the linchpin in the middle of the field. They were working the middle of the field a ton, and he was still a key cog, and then he scores the touchdown. That had to have been encouraging if that was his concern.
Yeah, they only had 33 targets in this game to distribute, and they did a very good job, I thought, of distributing them to multiple receivers. Is the point you made either in this show or the previous one? But I thought it was Andrews getting 8. He shouldn't be concerned at all about his position in this offense, other than he didn't really get the opportunity to run a lot of these deeper seam plays and whatnot. But let's look at it. The Ravens didn't really throw the ball deep in this game. One time to Flowers. Other than that, they really didn't do much between even level 2 and 3 in this game to throw intermediate balls that Andrews could have turned into some significant yak.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just I can't speak highly enough of the guy as far as just being everything that they need to get the offense going. And he's Lamar's guy, like 100%. Flowers is coming in. He's the hot new name right now. Beckham obviously brings all the attention to your point, and Bateman is certainly at his moments, but it is always going to be Mark Andrews. It's going to be Lamar Jackson's guy. And it's just a marked difference when he's on the field, as we saw.
All right. Maybe we talk about Edwards a little bit. Edwards, he really deserves some discussion anyway. The big thing about him, 3 first downs on third down, running the ball in the fourth quarter. Rushing first downs aren't all that common. Rushing first downs on third down aren't all that common. Rushing first downs on third down in the fourth quarter are incredibly uncommon. They're very difficult to get. And they helped the Ravens grind out this football game. He had some big breakaway runs earlier in the game. I think one for 17, another one for 20. So it wasn't like he was devoid of longer runs. And when the Ravens needed it, he seemed to know where that yellow line was instinctively, because it's not actually on that football field as much as we're used to watching it on TV.
Yeah, it for a guy who had a pretty bad injury with 2021, obviously, and then he comes back last year. It felt like last year was still sort of dealing with it. And there's degenerative issues and stuff that can happen with those injuries. So yeah, he was still really kind of just gearing up to get back to a role like this. I felt like at times in 2022, and it was really good to see, man. And he had some really nice runs in the open field, but to me, you hit on it. It was the fourth quarter, man. He's their closer. He's been their closer for a couple of years. You get him in there, and guess what? The defense knows what's coming, and guess what? They can't stop it. If you need 3 yards to get to the sticks, I'm going to get you 3 yards. If you need 6 yards to get you the sticks, I'm going to get you 6 yards. We're just going to do exactly what we need to do to close this thing out. It is cold. It is emotionless. It has got to be gut wrenching as a fan to have to watch that guy grind out your team in the fourth quarter of games. And I'm glad he's on our side.
Yeah. And as a defender, I absolutely love it.
Let's go with, pull up my list here. How about Odell Beckham?
Sure. He
gets hurt, obviously. But like I said, and like I alluded to, I thought he looked solid before that. He had a couple nice, I think, whip routes to the outside there. Jackson just seems to have a pretty decent amount of trust in him. He targeted him a couple of times in week 1, drew a few PIs in some nice Torrey Smith fashion there, and then he had obviously the nice over-the-shoulder catch. But man, he looked, I think, a little bit more settled in this week. It felt like a little less feast or famine, and a little more like this guy is going to be the featured receiver. And to your point, maybe the usage as like that traditional X role, maybe we don't necessarily love that, but I don't know. It just looks solid. Every time he threw him the ball prior to getting injured, looked good, looked like that kind of move the chains type of guy that at the very least he can be, and maybe he can be even a little bit more than that. So I was encouraged.
Yeah, through 2 games now, he's averaged 33 yards a game. You project that out for a full season, you end up at what, 561 or something like that. That would be completely acceptable in terms of what you get out of Odell Beckham. And it'd be even more acceptable given the fact that he's drawing penalties at a high rate early in the season. So he's had 3. One of them was what, as you would refer to, I think, a Torrey Smith PI, where he gets behind the defense and forces the defensive back who hasn't found the football to drive through him to try and stop the reception. That's just him getting vertical and being more explosive than the guy who's covering him. But the other 2 were incredible savvy, manipulate the official, the cutoff DPI that he got in the first game. And then this thing where he dragged out a defender on top. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it to draw a defensive hold on a play like that. It just basically draws a guy down. And it's not like the official didn't have kind of a side eye on him at the time. He's kind of looking straight ahead. He sees it from the side. Odell Beckham, pulls the guy down on top of it, throws up his arms immediately. The official just throws the flag right out there. It was beautiful.
Yeah, there's veteran savvy when it comes to technique. There's veteran savvy when it comes to understanding the playbook. There's veteran savvy in a lot of different ways, but knowing how to draw a penalty is one of the more beautiful ones that I can think of, and he's done a nice job of it so far.
Moses Malone, the guy who's known about it in the NBA for years, about acting like he's getting killed inside on every single play and drawing tons of fouls. So
Beckham, a big soccer fan, so maybe that's a part of it.
Could be. Yes, they're floppers. Yeah. And they don't have that yet. They have it in hockey. They have it built into the game that if you flop, you lose. And in soccer, you can get yellow carded, right, for flopping?
Yeah, you can. It's not used the most liberally from what I've seen.
Okay. But as far as I know, they don't have it in football. They don't have throw an unsportsmanlike flag for attempting to flop. But it'd be an interesting addition to the game if that suddenly became more of a problem.
Sure.
I think I'm about ready to tap out on this. We could talk a little bit about Flowers because he obviously is still a big part of the offense in this week. Nice to see him get that vertical route and have the ball tossed to him in the sense that it puts it on tape, not necessarily in the sense that it was a good risk-reward decision, but it worked out fantastic. And I definitely want to see more of that in terms of trying to get him the ball behind the defense and forcing defenses to convert to try to stop him.
And I think they went to him twice immediately after that. They wanted to get him into the end zone. I think they not only did they want to get him the touchdown, I just think that they really want their offense and their passing game to run through him to a certain extent. And he obviously wasn't a huge part of the game plan in the first half, but yeah, I mean, right after that, they go to him, they try to get him in on the screen. I think they run pretty much the exact same play again, and it doesn't go anywhere because I think the defense was just kind of keyed in on him. But then, you go the other way, and who's there? It's Mark Andrews. So yeah, it's just good to have a guy like that just in 2 games into his career is commanding respect at the wide receiver position. You never thought you would be here as a Ravens fan, and now you're here, and I'm telling you to enjoy it.
Now, this is a rare thing because you go to camp and you see this guy play. And it's just he's a different level of ability to lose the defenders play after play. And there's one story I really like from this. I told this once on the camp notes, but it's the kind of thing that really sticks with you, is they were doing one-on-one drills. And one-on-one drills are already incredibly unfair to the defensive back who has to cover a wide receiver. Plus, they don't really allow them to be physical. And they're often, but this might have been in pads. There might have been a little more physicality to it. And Kayvon Seymour had responsibility for covering Flowers on 3 consecutive one-on-one drills. The first 2, Flowers beat him once deep. He beat him once on a cut where he left him basically hanging out to dry and got a ton of separation. The third time, Kayvon Seymour lines up in press coverage, immediately grabs onto his jersey and holds him there for a few seconds. And finally, they blow the play dead. The entire defensive unit, it's defensive unit being the other pass defenders, cornerbacks who were in that group, all ran out and were patting him on the helmet. This looks like it was the biggest steal ever. And that is an impactful receiver who caused that kind of a response.
Yeah, and it's just nothing they've really had before. Hollywood Brown certainly was very fast, but it feels like there's just a physical je ne sais quoi, or kind of a physical presence with Flowers, despite he's still pretty diminutive in terms of height, but there just feels like there's a physicality that he plays with. He kind of plays above the rim, little Steve Smith kind of in that respect. So
yeah, that might end up being a very good analog for him or a comparison. Really have appreciated doing this with you. Let me see if there's any mailbag questions we could get to really quickly, and then if there are, we'll do that. I know there were a couple, and I hate to leave them out there and not respond to them. So give me just a second here and I'll find this. All right. We have another one here. Is it a valid concern? This is Andrew Konaziski, who says, is it a valid concern that Lamar had 12 rushes to aid closing out the game?
A valid concern in what respect?
Well, he doesn't go on beyond that. So we have to kind of build some of the question for him when people do that, unfortunately. I thought there weren't a lot of designed runs. There were certainly a fair number of scrambles from Lamar. I didn't like the hit he took late in the game to stay in bounds. Yeah. I kind of wish he'd gotten down a little sooner. But are you generally concerned about the number of carries he's had earlier in the season?
No, I don't think so, because of the avoiding the design runs. I think those are kind of the ones where you do tend to take hits a little bit, and he certainly does lean into contact sometimes on scrambles. But I don't know. I just always think back to that Seattle game in 2019 where he really announced himself, and that felt like a lot of there were some design runs in that game. He had the fourth down call, obviously, but it felt like he closed that game out by spreading the wide receivers out, just taking the defense down the field, and then just scrambling, just running like the wind at avoiding contact, I think. So I don't think scrambling is a bad thing necessarily, especially when you can avoid contact. But to your point, he did take that one late in the game. It's like we can probably avoid that. But yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned with it.
Yeah. All right. We got another good one here. This is from Matt L., who says, how do you think we could look to deal with Higgins better if we were to have a playoff rematch? It seems like Higgins versus Washington was a mismatch the Bengals looked for a lot in the second half. He's absolutely right. They looked at Higgins on anybody as a mismatch size-wise, which it really is. Also had a great play against Darby in the end zone to toe tap and use his arm length to basically shield the ball and be able to still be acrobatically what he needed to be to stay in bounds there.
Yeah, if he goes from the slot, I'm not sure how often they run him out of there. Kyle Hamilton probably is the guy that can really handle him from a physical perspective, and Hamilton has played from the slot before, so that would be the one that I look to. But I just look at these offenses, and the Bengals are really a perfect example of a passing offense like this, where you really just got to pick your poison. And it felt like they were saying, you're not going to beat us with Jamar Chase in this game. You're just not going to do it. So if you want to turn to Higgins, go ahead and do it. And they did, and it was almost enough, but it wasn't enough. So maybe that's a winning formula, is to kind of let them go to him a little bit, or maybe it'll be Tyler Boyd the next time around. But I don't know. I just think they have a thing with Jamar Chase where they are not big fans of him on that defense. And I think in the coaching staff, they recognize what a absolute game breaker he could be. So
right. I think they did a pretty good job containing Higgins in this game. 12 targets for 89 yards. I mean, that's under 8. It's 7, or be like more like 7.4 yards per attempt or per target. I don't think that's a terrible number to give up to T. Higgins. He had a very bad week 1, by the way. They didn't have any completions to him in week 1. And Burrow was not effective throwing the ball deep in this game. He was 0 for 7 with an interception, throwing 15 plus yards. So I think they did a pretty good job of culling the big plays from that Cincinnati offense.
Yeah, I think there's just an extent of having to take your medicine as a modern defense in the NFL. Like, some guys are just going to beat you sometimes. And obviously you don't want to get into that headspace necessarily, especially as a coach. But I don't know. I think you're going to take your lumps, and a guy like Higgins is talented. And to your point, it wasn't that crazy of an impact. If you take, you're not going to take away the 2 touchdowns, obviously, but maybe you don't get over influenced by those.
Right. Very true. Okay, got one more, and then we'll call it quits here for today. I'm sorry for not getting to the entire mailbag, guys, but sometimes we have to cut it a little short. Daniel Sampaio. I'm sorry, I think I've got that right. Sampaio. Is McCary the best sixth-man offensive lineman in the NFL? He's capable of playing better than starters at times, and he's bailed out the Ravens numerous times. At what point is he going to get the respect that he deserves from pundits/fans? I'll start with this, and I want to hear your thoughts on the matter too. He's a backup left tackle at this point for the Baltimore Ravens, and I love him in exactly that role. I hope if they don't, even if Ronnie Stanley were to come back, I think they'd be making a mistake if they inserted him at center for anything more than a finish the game situation. How would you feel about that at this point? Would you be okay with him playing to finish out a game at some other position other than left tackle?
Yeah, I mean, with the experience at center, I'd certainly be fine with that. I know it's been a little while, but I don't know. He just seems like, to his point, kind of that perfect sixth man. And you'd want it probably restricted to those 2 positions if you can do it. You don't want to have to be shuffling him around the way they did early in his career, because it just hinders development and it's not good for consistency with the line at large. So, yeah, I am good with it, though. He's versatile for a reason. That's why they paid him to be that sixth man, I think, is in the event that they did need him to exercise that versatility. So, yeah, I mean, as far as him getting his flowers, yeah, you're right. He's a 6th offensive lineman on the Baltimore Ravens. So I don't know, like Dennis Kelly, I think, was a well-known swing tackle throughout the league. I really can't think of many other guys where I'm thinking of them in that kind of way. So, people like us, we'll see him around town. We'll buy him a beer. Hey, you're Patrick McCary. But outside of here, he's not going to get a ton of recognition. I think that's fine, and I think he's fine with that.
Yeah. And I would agree. I'm, we saw Tyree Phillips be a backup tackle, and honestly didn't play well enough at backup tackle that you were concerned about losing him anywhere else. But in that first game of 2021, he got hurt playing left guard, and then the Ravens, were that much more short in terms of tackle depth. And that's my major concern, is that I'd rather have Mustipher be the guy who backs up Linderbaum than have McCary ever take time at center, where I think, actually having McCary over Mustipher is a pretty marginal gain at center, but having McCary over the field at left tackle right now appears to be an enormous chasm.
Yeah, no, and I do like the point that you make there, where it's sometimes good to just have a guy who plays a position, just play that position and specialize in that. And everyone loves versatility, and that's all great. But we've seen them maybe try to pigeonhole players like a Kamalei Correa, where it's like, oh, well, he was a hand in the dirt pass rusher at Boise State, but let's mess around with that a little bit. Let's have him drop and do this and that. It's like, no, maybe sometimes you just want to like have a guy who is good at a thing to a certain extent and have him just do that thing.
All right. Well, Jake, been terrific having you on here. Thanks for going with the flow here and letting this last a little longer than it normally does. But great discussion. Really appreciate talking football with you. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, sure. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. You can find me at Jake Luke on Twitter, and that's LOUQUE. And check us out on the Exit 52 podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your shows.
All right. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. You know the drill by now. Always looking for new ideas that we can discuss in a thought-provoking way on this show. If you DM me, I do promise I'll get back to you quickly and we'll discuss your idea. Jake, thanks again for joining me. Terrific episode, I thought.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, sir.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.